So let me get started. Now, I'm going to do a quick introduction to myself because I'm not sure if everybody, and I won't be able to see everybody while I'm talking either. Um, Quick introduction to myself. But if questions do come up, in fact, let me just pop out the chats. There we go. Yeah, if you do have any questions along the way, just pop them in the chat, and I'll keep my eye out for them as I go along. Or if you're obviously in the community, you can message me separately afterwards in the DMs or on LinkedIn if that's the route you've come in via as well for this. So we are going to talk about how to tackle problems and prioritize your time as a. Oh, I've just noticed my first mistake. I should say as a project manager. Look at that. Doesn't matter how long you stare at things for. Sometimes they only appear when they really matter. But anyway, project managers. And this is the first of 4 sessions that I'm doing this month, all around planning, because it's all building up towards the release of my new planning bootcamp at the end of the month, which if you're part of the community and you're potentially on the wait list, you might have heard about this already. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And I'll tell you about the dates for the other ones as well if you're not already aware. So I'm Ben. Just so if we haven't met, my background is being a PM for 20 odd years. And over half of that time, I was leading project management teams as well, predominantly in the digital industry. Worked for small agencies, really big agencies, Accenture Interactive being the biggest one. Worked across lots of different industries. I've created all sorts of different courses and videos and blogs and tons of stuff on not just project management, but productivity as well. Just because if you're not productive as a project manager, you're going to struggle no matter how many skills you've got. And if you don't know, PPM Academy, that is my training company. Also, the name, obviously, the community, as many of you know as well. So that is me. And what we're going to cover today is I'm going to talk to you about how to manage your workload, all related to your to-do list. So I'll take you through an approach that I've been using for quite a few years. It's really effective for me. And I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the distractions around time management as well, which can obviously impact how much you get done in a day at any given time. And I'm going to talk to you about an approach that I call a solutions map. It's about not just actually how you turn a problem into a solution fast, but it's a really simple way to help sort of brainstorm ideas to come up with improvements to processes and communications and absolutely anything actually before you get stuck into the detail. And then I'll also tell you about something that I teach and have been using for many years. I used it a lot more when I was 100% on projects as well to do short-term planning at a high level, especially when you're in those really busy periods as a project manager. So those are 3 areas I'm going to cover. I'm going to touch on, as I mentioned, distractions first of all. Now, I'm sure you can all relate. There's so many distractions in whether you're a project manager or not, whether you work in the office or you work remotely or a bit of both, there are so many things going on that can distract us. And this can have a real impact on obviously how productive we are in the work that we do. That then obviously can build up pressures. And then that also might cause you to work on the wrong things at the wrong time. And I'm just going to give you a few stats just to get you thinking a little bit. Now, this is from the One Thing, which is a really good book by Gary Keller. 28% of the working day is lost to task switching and procrastination. So this is, I feel, as I've experienced it, so relevant for project managers because we're working with lots of individuals, lots of teams, third parties, tools, we're involved in everything. So task switching, more so than procrastination, is something you need to be really aware of. And there was a study done where it apparently it takes 23 minutes for you, if you're working on a task and you get distracted by something else, 23 minutes to get fully back in focus again on that task, which is pretty crazy. Um, Quite hard to imagine it taking that long because you can jump straight back onto it. But if you're not being as efficient as you could be, then everything is obviously going to take longer. And then obviously that can impact your to-do list as well. Or another one in 3 people live in their email system, Outlook, whatever it might be. So 32%-ish, permanently keeping it open. So like I've got 2 screens open at the moment. Having one, your Outlook open all the time as a PM, unless it's an absolute 100% need, don't do it because it is so distracting and you will then start responding to the wrong things in terms of urgency at the wrong time. Or another version of that, similar sort of percentage, having notifications on all the time. So every time an email comes in, and that actually has the same impact of you're working on one thing and then you just see that little notification come in. You might not stop and actually click on it, but that's enough to take you away from that focus. And again, that whole 23 minutes point that I mentioned before then comes into play. So if you're doing any of that, I turned off notifications for everything years ago, apart from like meetings and things like that, because of how distracting it is. And I've mentioned these stats because it's relevant when it comes to managing your own to-do list. If you are suddenly getting distracted by emails, and we often feel like we need to just jump in and respond to an email quickly, it always feels like it's urgent, or a Slack message or a Teams message, but you never truly know unless someone says, I must know this right now, then it probably isn't urgent. And that can just pull you away. And before you know it, your day's done and you don't really know what you've got done and all your workload's piling up. So be very aware is one thing I would say about distractions, whether it's email or notifications. And there's just one tip to rule them all, as I put it. Just be proactive over reactive. And I mentioned that a few times in this session. It's so important to be proactive in what you do when it comes to managing your actions, when it comes to reporting, when it comes to reaching out for somebody to help them, when it comes to thinking ahead for a potential risk on a project. It doesn't matter what it is, the more you can get into that proactive mind state and action state as a project manager, the easier everything comes. And I don't just mean what's happening tomorrow, it's about what's happening in a few days, what's happening next week, what's happening next month, getting into that rhythm. And I'll talk to you about the rhythm when it comes to managing your to-do list shortly as well. So proactive over reactive, don't forget that one. So I'm going to take you through the proactive planning approach, hence the name proactive, to help control your workload, your to-do list. And so a couple of steps to this. First step is the process to go through. And by all means, listen and think about it in a way that go, yeah, I like this bit. Maybe you adapt it slightly. The whole point of everything that I teach is try and make it as simple as practical as possible, but completely open to be adapted as well and improved along the way. And then the second step is when you manage your tasks. So that frequency and that rhythm, that proactivity that I mentioned before is really, really important. If you just manage your task in a certain way, haphazardly and every now and again, then you're going to struggle to stay on top of your workload. So step one, how to plan better, get ownership of your to-do list, and ultimately gain more time, because the more efficient you are and you're working on the right things at the right time, that does create more time in the long run, which I'll touch on in a bit shortly. So the real problem is you're being owned by your actions versus you owning them. So that's that reactive point. If you're always just responding to what's happening around you, and email is the classic example there. If you're continually just responding to email, you're just reacting to what's happening. If you're not being proactive and thinking ahead, then you are just being owned by your day. And that's when your days fly by. That's when problems starts to stack up. More overwhelm, more stress, particularly in those really, really busy moments. So the way that helped me, and then the people who've been in my teams and have taken this on in the past, is implementing this proactive planning. And it's a really simple approach. Now, I'll introduce you to the funnel first, which is what you can see now. And because most project managers, you're dealing with just this constant flow of tasks coming into your to-do list, whether that's from the client, the team, whatever it might be, actions taken from meetings, there's always something. In my experience, there's just never a quiet moment. Most of them appear urgent, but like I said, that doesn't mean they actually are. We just have these sort of pre or misconceptions, I could say, about email and Slack and Teams, that just because it pops in, then it's urgent. But most of the time, most tasks aren't. And as a PM, you always want more time in the day, because with more time, you're in more control, you make less mistakes, there's less overwhelm. And if you run it through your actions through this funnel, then it really does help with it. So let me take you through what each one is. Now, eliminate. So when you're busy, under pressure, stressed, again, you're more likely to just work on tasks as they come in. You're like, I'll just get this done. I'll just get that done. Just get this done. Because you have that brain fog. You don't have time to think, do I need to actually do this? Now, the first question you should ask yourself is, do I have to do this? Do I have to do this right now, or can I eliminate it? And you can change the word eliminate to something else if you like, but as long as it means you just removing it completely. Now, if I don't do this, will anyone care or ask? Or is this actually bringing any value? So, wherever you get the chance, ask yourself that question because sometimes you don't have to do everything that comes your way, but you have to be ruthless. It's not easy. And if you can't eliminate it, then the next question is automate. So I mentioned a couple of times before about getting back more time, and actually this is the one of the ways you can do it. And it really does accelerate your career as well, because the more you can automate things, the more control you have, the more confidence you have, the more confidence people have in you as well, because ultimately you're just getting things done quicker. Um, so, for example, I don't just mean AI and various automation tools and things like that. That can be part of it, but it's actually if you're consistently getting asked about the same information from a client, maybe not at the same time, it's just a bit random, and you're having to ask team members for this information and that data, then why not go, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to collate all of this into a single accessible page. And I'm going to ask the team at certain times each week just to publish their updates to that page. And then the client I'll let her know that that information is there at a certain time. Now, that might only save you 10, 20 minutes a week. But if you can think of all those little things that you're repeating and sucking up your time, then that has that compounding effect on your time. And that's where it frees up your time as well as things that you are repeating from a process perspective. Just writing down the checklist for the 5 things. You don't have to go and double check again what you need to do. You can just refer to your checklist. Or, right, we need to plan the next review meeting with a client. Right, here's my 20 things that I need to do. Boom, 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 boom. You just go through it super quick. Saves time, makes a real big difference. And all that little savings of time, as I said, just has that compounding effect day after day, week after week. The bottom one, if you can't do those two, eliminate or automate, like can you delegate it? This isn't easy because I've worked with loads of different project managers and they all have a common trait, and that's they want to help the team they work with. And which is a good thing. And I've done that and I've said yes to far too many things in the past. I've taken on far too many actions just because I want to help. But you're not always the right person to do things. So you need to question, can I delegate this to someone else? And you'll be surprised the more you start to ask for help, or can you do this, Jim, Claire, whoever it might be, then you will get yeses. You might get some no's, but sometimes when you get a no, it's actually super helpful as a PM because they'll give you a reason why. And I've experienced where someone says, no, I can't do that, I'm afraid, because I'm working on this. And I'm like, oh, hang on, why are you working on that? That's not, we shouldn't be doing that right now. Well, I'm so glad I asked. So sometimes you do get that extra little bit of information that can be helpful for you as well. Or you've delegated it and that's freed up your time. Now, one thing I would say is your tasks go through here. Sometimes there are things that it just makes sense I'm just going to do this right away. I'm just going to do it. And you can still ask yourself through the funnel, but sometimes it just, as I said, just do it now, get it done, get it out the way, and you'll know when you have to do those things. But then you can also ask yourself, okay, this does need to be done. I can't eliminate, I can't automate, I can't delegate, but I can do it later. And this is in some cases where the proactive planning approach really helps you from freeing up your time again. Because what you do then with that task, and this could be, let's say, 4 days later, a week later, whatever it might be, you put it back through the funnel again. You're like, actually, it's been a week. Do I actually need to do this? And I used to have this problem before I did this, where my to-do list just had this graveyard of actions, just building up all these things I wanted to do or may have been asked to do at some point, but it just wasn't that important. And it was just clogging everything up and clogging my mind up as well. So then you can bring it back round and just go, actually, I'm just going to delete this. They've not asked me about it again. It's not important. We've moved on. Clean up my inbox, my to-do list, and just have in there just the things that are really important. And then obviously then you get a bit more time back to work on things that are more important, more value or more valuable for your project. Um, so that's the funnel to help you get back more time. I'm just going to take you through step two now. So when. Now, on the when, you can pick some different times for this, but the really important thing is you have a consistent time of when you are reviewing your task, which is not always easy to do, but if you ever do miss it, then you want to get back in as soon as you possibly can to do a review, because otherwise things start building up, and then, as I said earlier, you lose that control of what the actions that you need to do. So do you find yourself like regularly having to replan your to-do list and the project plan, and it just adds more and more actions, but it just doesn't seem to make much of a difference? Or maybe once you've done that replanning and of everything you need to get on with, it might be all right for a day or two, but after a week or so, it's kind of like back to it was again, where the actions just piling in. And you might be having a lot of last minute actions as well. And the more last minute things coming into you, that just says you're not being proactive enough. That's not the only reason, but if you're not being proactive in managing your actions in a way like I've just described and in a consistent way as well, then it's very, very likely that it's all about the lack of proactivity. Um, so if you've got that inconsistent planning cycle, that is the problem, and it's really important to have one. And there is like a simple change you can make, and it's just to implement it into your month, week, and days. Easy change to make, but the reason it works is because each planning cycle supports the next. So there's less silo, or hopefully none at all, planning sessions. You're always thinking about the weeks, the days, the weeks, and the month planning as well. And they're purposely linked. So you're always looking further ahead for your projects, for the actions with your team, your client, etc., and things like that. And the biggest impact of this when you have this up and running is confidence. Because the more in control you are, obviously overwhelmed dies down, you're thinking more proactively, you're thinking further ahead, your confidence goes up. And then, like I mentioned before, the confidence in you goes up as well. So let me just take you through really simple what you need to do. So managing and prioritizing your tasks, yeah, you're going to be looking at this daily, but it's also weekly and monthly. And that's the cycle that you want to get into it. And once you gain that control, it's a really good feeling as a project manager that when you are feeling in control. But let me start with monthly. So imagine if you were building a house, monthly is like the architect drawing. So you're kind of like asking yourself, what do you want to do? What does this thing need to look like across the month? And for a project manager, these are like the main areas of focus for the month. So it could be a major change you need to implement, or preparation for a release of a website, or a client review. Just pick out the big stuff and see when those things are happening across the month, and then break that down into 4 weekly goals. Week 1, the most important thing this week is preparation for that client release. Week 2 is a client review. Whatever it might be, just a few words, just so it's clear for you. Doesn't need to be any more than that. This is just for you. And then you want to ask yourself, okay, I've got these 4 things that I want to get done week to week. They're my number one priorities. I'm not saying you won't have other things to do, but these are the number one each week, one goal a week. What could stop you? Really important to ask yourself that question, because there's always something, there's always an obstacle that could come your way. So again, you want to be proactive and think about what could stop you. List them out and think about how you're going to mitigate them when you're creating the tasks or whatever it might be. And finally, if you are doing this, or you have done this the previous month, it's always worth thinking back to the last month. What didn't quite go quite so well? What actually was there a surprise blocker that came in? So that's monthly. And then you want to move to weekly. So you've got those architect's drawings and you want to know what you want your month to look like and the structure, which is the weekly goals to deliver it. And you've got to order the supplies now to build that house. What will it look like? So, what do you need to be able to do to be able to build that house and deliver against those weekly goals you set? So, you're sitting down on a Monday morning now and going, right, I've got this goal for this week. This is the one big goal. What are the things that I need to do to be able to get me there? And again, it's not every single action, but it's the key thing is I've got to speak to this person on Wednesday because the meeting's on Friday. It's always thinking ahead, always being proactive. I need to block some time out here to work on this task. I need to ask these questions now to make sure I get them back in time. Again, high level tasks, but then you can start to plot them in your diary throughout the week, whether that's your paper diary or it's literally in your Outlook or whatever it might be. But they're all linked to achieving that one big goal. And again, talk about what could go wrong. What's going to stop me from doing this? And the more you think about what could stop you from going wrong, the easier things will be. And then, like the monthly example I said, if you've done this week before, think about what didn't work so well last week. Okay, so next one is daily. This is, you're building it now. You're on the ground. You're literally doing what needs to happen. And you're setting daily mini goals that still link to that weekly goal as well. And you want to now be thinking about what are the activities, the tasks that I need to do in my day. And what works really well for me is I break it down into 30-minute slots. It's not saying that I get every task done in 30 minutes, but it's a really good way to have a structured day that you are taking control of. And if you're not planning out your day, then you're much more likely to be reactive to what's going on around you. And once you get into that reactive mode again, that's when the overwhelm can come. Now, when I say planning out a day, and I'm just looking at the comments coming in, and I'll try and respond to these as I go through. I don't mean you're going to have the perfect day because you can't. You're working with human beings, and human beings can disrupt. They can cause you problems. There's all sorts of things that can go on. But you've got to do some proactive planning for it. Otherwise, you will just be seeing what happens, what lands on your lap, what lands in your inbox, and just dealing with it. And even if it means being proactive and planning your day, it just means that you actually worked on one thing for a couple of hours spread across the day that you wanted to and you know was valuable, then that's a win. And then you slowly build on what else, what other questions do I keep getting asked? Why am I getting these tasks? And then you think, okay, well, maybe if I ask these questions ahead of time, I'll get less of these things coming in at me in the moment on the day. And Elizabeth, you said about how is that sustainable when you have multiple projects? It's just simplifying it as much as possible. Again, the process doesn't change. It's like monthly. What are the big things that have to happen across my 5 projects this month? Don't try and cover too much. Just really be ruthless with the most important things that need to happen. So I'm not saying you're going to cover absolutely everything by doing this, but it's being proactive and going, well, what is the most important things I need to get done? What's going to stop me from getting them done? And at least have some of those significant things in your plan, in your to-do list. So you're moving towards getting whatever the priority items are. I hope that makes sense. It's all of it is just being about more proactive and more control rather than just going, I'm just going to see what's happened to me this week. And Alicia, working with 5 teams, it's probably the same sort of thing, really. Just being proactive with all of them. What are the types of questions or requests or problems that you consistently get from those teams? And then think about, well, flip it around. What can I do to prevent these problems and these questions with these teams? Or what can I do to be in more control of the questions or the problems that are coming? And a lot of the time, it is just being about more proactive in the communication. Okay, so, and good luck, 5 teams. That sounds like a lot. I'm not sure if that's across different projects or not, but you're not alone there. I know I've experienced having to manage many, many projects in one go. It's not easy. Um, so that is how you manage your tasks with the proactive planning funnel. And again, simplify it, do it quickly. This is just for you. And then also make sure you have a rhythm, whether it's monthly, weekly, daily, if that works for you, whatever it is. Maybe it's every 2 weeks, whatever works best for the type of projects that you're working on. Just make sure you have that consistent thread of, right, this is the day. It's been 2 weeks. I must have another review and see where we are with this. Right, it's a month. I must have a review. Put reminders in your calendar, including the process and the checks and the questions you want to ask yourself as well. So you don't have to think, especially that really helps in those really busy moments. Right. Next one, turning a problem into a solution. Now I'm going to take you through what I call the solutions map. And as I said right at the start, you can use this to improve. So you might have one-to-ones, you might be line managing. How can I improve line management with my team? Or you can use it with a problem. It works for both. And the reason why I love this approach and it works really well is it forces you to be quite high level at first before you get stuck into the detail. And it gets you to think about the current problem or the thing you want to improve, your ideal solution, and then the steps you could go through, like the different stages to potentially get you to that perfect solution. And quite often, as I'll explain, you may not need that perfect solution, which should make sense to go through this. So I'm going to use an example where a client is not happy about the latest version of the app you just released. Now, I know this won't be applicable for everyone. You've got a high number of bugs, manual testers doing it as well. There's a really long testing phase. Obviously, that opens to human error. Actually, getting an app ready and released takes 3 weeks, and the client's not happy there. It's far too long. I was expecting us to be much, much quicker than this. And they've said, well, what we want is we think you should have 2 automation testers. I want coverage 75% from a test perspective. I want a continuous integration running. I want weekly releases. And you may be going, oh my God, we're so far away from that. We haven't even hired those individuals. That is not something we can just turn around. But you're under real immense pressure from the client to do this. And I've experienced something like this many years ago. So what you do is you go, well, what's the next step we could do to move us a bit closer to this? So one automation tester, maybe you've hired a freelancer within a few weeks. They help you get up to 25% coverage. That might cut down the release to about 2.5 weeks, and you've got some reporting in there as well. And then you go, well, what's the next best version of that, if you like? Well, now we've got 2 freelance automation testers. They've built it up to 50%. Release is down to like 1.5 weeks, and we've actually got a continuous integration strategy and plan agreed. It doesn't matter if you know what these are or not, but what you can do is you can use this to increase the chances of a client agreeing to an interim solution rather than demanding it's all fixed in one go, because you're giving them options. So going back, you've been proactive in going, right, okay, we've listened to you, we understand this is where you want to get to. Here's the stages we could go through, and they're more likely to agree to something that's in the interim rather than just go and make everything happen in one go. And by involving them as well, so this isn't just an internal thing, it's much harder for a client, and this could be a stakeholder internal as well, to push back because, again, you're giving them those options. And the approach is planned across a period of time because you want to monitor improvements. I've made the mistake years ago where I designed a whole delivery methodology, sorry, and it took ages. And then by the time it was done, there's lots of it was like out of date or it didn't work quite right, didn't work correctly for every type of project that we wanted, versus just going, right, what's the first few things we could do? What's our version one? Do that and test it and get feedback. And if, like using the example I just gave, it reduces the risk of a big bang approach because if I went all the way to that final end and said, "This is it, we've done it all, multiple automation testers, etc., etc.," then you may have been distracted from lots of the other work you're supposed to be doing. You might have been actually created more problems as well because you're changing so much too quickly. And you can use other reasons to help with this. You can say, well, if we just do this incrementally, that still allows the team to be able to work on those other app features so it doesn't impact their release plans. And it goes, and it's the same for any other sort of big changes you want to make from a process or a workflow point of view. You just go, here's the stages we can go through. Let's do V1 first. Let's do V2. And you might have three, four, five different versions, but ideally we want to get to this. But sometimes what happens is you do a V1, the next stage, and that's enough value, enough change. You don't need to do anything else, and you can work on something else. And it's taking you a lot less time, a lot easier to do, and but everyone's still happy as well. Just before I move on to the final section, Annie, you're just saying part of my role needs to be quite reactive to urgent resource project changes day to day. So I found it helps for me to schedule blocks of time, morning, lunch, end of day to focus solely on these without impacting my focus time. Yeah, like for some projects, like if you have to be reactive to urgent things that are happening and that's quite consistent, yes, you're going to need your email or your Teams open and things like that. But the point is, and I think that's what you're saying and doing there as well, Annie, wherever you can, be proactive and take control of your day and block out time, whether it's blocking out time to work on one thing or it's just simply going, these are the things I'm going to work on and then plotting them out. Just being proactive and more control. Just do not rely on what's coming in because as a project manager, there's always things that you need to be doing. So it's very easy just to sit back and be reactive and just attend all the meetings and just reply to all the emails really quickly in the team's messages. But you're not in a leadership position. You're not acting like a leader if you're doing too much of that. Okay, so I'm going to move on. And again, any questions, please, like that, just pop them in the chat. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk to you about how I had a continuous short-term planning approach. And I still use this approach. It's not one that I came up with. I just adapted it to like more of a project management perspective. And they're called mind maps. And I'm going to tell you how I use mind maps. Now, I'll tell you what is a mind map, how to use them from a PM perspective, how they help with overwhelm and when you're really, really busy as well. But you can use them for all sorts of things, which I'll touch on shortly. And they're very, very simple to use. So, what is a mind map? For those of you who don't know, it's a diagram that presents information with a central idea in the middle and connected ideas arranged around it. And they look a bit like this. Here's a few examples. These are just off Google, not my ones. You can make them as beautiful as you like with colors, or just black and white, or that top left one. It's probably a really dull looking one, but there's lots of tools that do it now as well. Excuse me. But that's essentially what a mind map looks like. And you can create them to come up with holiday ideas, to redesigning your house, to planning a project. You can use them for absolutely anything, and I do because they're a super quick way to get your ideas down on paper. So why use a mind map? Dealing with overwhelm. Now, feel free to let me know in the chat if you've ever felt overwhelmed as a project manager. I definitely have multiple times, early in my career and later in my career as well. And it's not a nice feeling. Oh, Jen, oh dear, Sasha, oh dear. Hopefully this will help. It's very easy to get overwhelmed as a project manager because we are, we're central to everything that's going on. So you can get pulled into everything. And then it gets really, really difficult. So the way I just clicked off this, let me come back. There we go. So any of these sound familiar? You're feeling like you have too much to do and not enough time. You're lacking the confidence. There's a big milestone coming up, might be a big client meeting. You're dreading a client meeting you need to plan for. You're not feeling in control. You don't have the time to do the work because you're always in meetings. That's definitely a common one. And and there's a big problem on your project and you just don't want to deal with it. And then that just increases the overwhelm because the less time you have, then it just gets worse and worse and worse. Yeah, there's many, many different ways. And you might even had, I just want to call in sick today. I just don't feel like going in because of that pressure, which is a horrible place to be. And I had a point a few years back now where I was working so hard to try and fix the problems on this project with a really difficult client, and the team that I had available to me, unfortunately, were very nice, but they weren't very good at what they did, but there wasn't anyone else to do it. Um, and I got to the point where I had to say to our chief marketing officer, I said, I'm going to stop. I'm not doing this anymore. You have to come and fix this. I've done this, I've done that, and I can't do any more. And I didn't want to do that at first because I felt like I'd be letting them down. They'll think I wasn't very good or whatever it might be. But immediately it was like, "Oh, absolutely, I completely understand. You've been doing so much work on this. Take a step, just stop working completely for today. Let's talk about this tomorrow." And I was like, oh, it's so good. Now, hopefully, if you ever do get to that place, there'll be someone like that who will be understanding as well. But sometimes you just have to do it. You have to open up. So back to the presentation, mind maps. So they can help you. They create a plan and the tasks needed really quickly because they're very, very high level. Um, they help release stress because you're emptying your mind on paper. It's a bit like, I don't know if you ever woken up in the night and you're thinking about too many things that are going on, but actually just going and write it down rather than just lying there thinking about it. It makes a big difference and you can go back to sleep. It's the same sort of thing. They can be done anywhere. They can help you prioritize what's important, and they help provide you with a path forward. Plus, if you are using mind maps like in a meeting, then they let you take notes but still stay engaged in the conversation. And all you need is a pen and paper, something to write on so you can create them anywhere. You do them digitally as well. Make a mistake, doesn't matter. This is just for you. Just scribble it out and start a new connection. Stuck for ideas. They're really good for to get those creative juices going because everything else is in front of you. And if you need to impress, then you can use colors and patterns and get creative, and they're a great icebreaker. So I've used these on whiteboards, in meetings and client meetings. I've used them just on my notepads, and it always gets people asking, "Oh, what's that? What are you doing there?" But just because they're a little bit different, and actually, surprisingly, not that many people use them. So, how do you create one for anyone who's new to it? Using this topic that we're talking about right now, um, you create the main topic in the middle, how to create a mind map. And don't laugh at my handwriting. I've always had it this way. uh, and then you create the level two linking topics around it. So, what equipment would I recommend? Additional tips, finishing up, why mind maps, whatever it is that you need. And then you create the subtopics off level two, and then you can just keep going and going if you want to. Um, that is a really simple mind map, and again, that topic could be absolutely anything in the middle. And what else can you do with them? You could also highlight anything that needs to be done like immediately today. So if we're going back to how I started this section, you've got loads going on. Maybe you haven't got in control of your to-do list yet. You're just sort of like just feeling overwhelmed, feeling a bit stressed. Um, you start with, say, your project A in the middle. Or it could be my workload, and then you've got those five teams around it, Alicia, and that's like your secondary one. And then off those five teams, then you start to link out the main things that need to be done for each one. So you can then, once you've plotted all of this out, like those examples I gave, you can then highlight, okay, what do I really need to get done right now? What's really, really important? I must get this done today. Highlight that with an I or a T or a red color, whatever it might be. You can highlight anything that needs to be delegated. Actually, I can ask my team member or this person, these things if they can do that. Put a D next to those. You could highlight anything that needs to be ignored or parked. You can highlight anything that needs to be looked at next week. Or anything else that's relevant for your project or whatever you're doing. And other things you can do, or these are more tips actually. Write the words first, not the connectors, because if you don't, the connectors start to get really messy. You don't make the best use of space. Um, if you're creating those level two topics, if you think you'll have five or six, just spread them out evenly all around that level one topic. Just again, making use of space. When creating a new level, ensure the first word isn't too far away because you'll run out of space. Use different color pens for different levels if you want to, just makes it easier to read. And you can use mind mapping groups. So it's amazing. And I've done this where you've had three or four people around a mind map and everyone's adding things to it. And you come up with so many ideas and thoughts. And other places you can use them, touched on some of these one-to-one meetings because then you spend less time with your head down because you're just writing high level things. And it's amazing. You could fill a paper up with just one or two words all linked together, and it's enough for you to remember the context in the conversation you're having about them. And then if you're using them in a meeting, you can mark the actions like with a little A as you go, and then it just speeds up at the end of the meeting to go, right, actions are boom, 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 because they're nice and clear. Versus when you write on a laptop, you tend to write too much, so it stops you from writing too much. Like I said before, if you're stuck for ideas for something, they're a really good way to get those creative juices going. Use a big whiteboard when facilitating meeting, like clients love them. And career development chat with a team member. Use a mind map to go big and broad. So, mind maps, all sorts of different ways you can use them. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, say it's a Friday and you're thinking, oh God, already thinking about Monday, so much to do, find a quiet space and just write down everything you can think of that you need to be doing. So that first action of doing that just gets the stress down because you're putting it down on paper. And then you could start to go, don't need to do that. I need to do this. That could be delegated. I'm eliminating that, whatever it might be. And it just has an amazing effect on how you feel. So it just gives you a bit more control back in the day. So just kind of quick look in the chats. So yeah, as you were saying, having it all the time. Yeah, Alicia, you said you're an admin coordinator, so much harder to delegate when you're in that starting out position, if you like. But still, all of this is applicable. And you mentioned you have ADHD, so working on good habits to reduce this, yeah. So that's good. Just being very aware of the things, the triggers, the things that can cause overwhelm for you, or behaviors that might not serve you, and things like that. Being super aware of all of those is just fantastic because then you can come up with the little steps and the little processes or the behaviors that you go, no, hang on a minute, I'm feeling like this. Remind myself, if I feel like this, then I do this, whether that's getting up and going for a walk or mind mapping, whatever it might be. Brilliant. Okay, so what's the time? Nearly wrapping up now. So I'm just going to take you through a few other things just to summarize. So those three different areas. I hope there's some of those that could work for you and adapt. But if you're in the community, you can message me about it in the DMs, or if you just come via LinkedIn, obviously you can message me on LinkedIn as well with any other questions that come up. And just to finish up, got three more planning help webinars coming up this month. Tuesday the 28th, I'm going to go through 10 health check tips for your plan. And the third one on the Wednesday that week, on the 29th, I'm going to take you through some tips for managing change effectively on your project. And then the final one of the month is wrapping up your project. So taking you through a load of things that you could need to think about or consider when it comes to closing down a project. And again, that's it. Well, these are all at 6 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the final three. Plus, because you might be aware, I've heard me mention it already, I'm releasing a brand new course, all on project planning at the end of the month. I'm giving away some free prizes for anyone who attends live for those final sessions. On each session, I'm going to give away a coaching session with me for free. And on the final webinar on the 30th, I'm going to be giving away 3 free places on the planning bootcamp, which goes live towards the end of the month. And the way I'll be announcing these is, I think we're all connected on LinkedIn, but I'll be doing a digital spinny wheel thing, and I'll announce the winner the next day on LinkedIn. So if you want to have any of those, all for free, join those other webinars, and you either can sign up for those through the community or through LinkedIn. They're on both at the moment, and you can win those lovely free prizes. And I mentioned the planning bootcamp, so give you a quick overview of what it is. And as I said, this is coming in a few weeks' time. 6 week training program, 30 plus on demands lessons, weekly Q&As to to learn with your fellow cohort takers. So that's led by me, questions about what you've learned, other problems you might have from a planning perspective, and it's a really nice group way to help each other out, not just me providing advice. I also do like a learn with me approach. So part of the training, if you sign up for it, you get 2 one-to-ones with me as well. And we can talk about anything from a planning perspective you might have challenges with. So completely bespoke to you, or anything in general. Could be productivity, could be project management, whatever it is you want to talk about. It's completely up to you. It's going to be a maximum of 20 spaces because of those one-to-ones that I'm doing as well. And you also get prioritized access to me in the DMs within the community across those 6 weeks. For any planning emergencies or any project questions you might have that I can help you with, I'll be online to help you with those as well. And then if you haven't seen already, these are on my website, but these are the modules. So module 1, take you through the rules of good planning, what they are and why they matter. The second is the pillars. So what are the foundations that you need for any plan? The third is planning for different project types, so fixed scope or time and materials or retainers, anything like that. So how do you plan and adapt accordingly? Big one, number 4, what can go wrong? So I'll go through a load of common challenges and issues on projects when it comes to planning, and then some ways to help prevent them or manage them, depending on what's needed. 5 is all about communication. So how do you communicate these with your team? How do you ensure your team are listening? How do you ensure your team are inputting into the plan? All of that good, challenging stuff that is fairly consistent on a lot of projects. And then closing down a project. So the approach to actually do that through the communication, through the steps you can take and adapt for your projects as well. And then number 7, I go through a number of different ways how to plan different things. So it could be a discovery phase, it could be a sprint, it could be a retainer, things like that to give you a good sort of baseline understanding of how to plan those different types of projects that you can then take away and adapt and use yourself. And then the final one is managing the plan. So this is all about you. Like I've just mentioned overwhelm in this webinar. There's a number of things. If you don't look after yourself as a project manager, then you're really, really going to struggle. Because, well, using overwhelm is the perfect example for it. So that's the 8 modules. Jen, you said, is it focused on? No, it's not focused on either, actually, because I've been trained in both over the years, and I've never consistently been on one side or the other. It's always been a bit of both, hybrid. Like I have used Scrum, but then there was elements within the Scrum setup that were definitely a bit more waterfall because of the clients and the other companies we were working with. And I've worked using waterfall as well, but then try to integrate elements of more agile ways of working into it. So it is, let's just call it hybrid, but it's not one thing. It's going pretty broad with all different types of problems and challenges. Yeah, as you said, really, really, everything's hybrid really these days. Thanks, Annie. I know you got a drop. Final thing is, if you've got any questions about the planning bootcamp, but I will be sharing more information over the next couple of weeks, you can scan that QR code and on the left, and you can book a call with me. No obligation to sign up for it at all. Just ask me any questions you've got, and then there might be some things I can help you with as well. The middle one just links off to my website, the PPM Academy. There's just a bit more information on the lessons within the modules. And if you're not already part of the Academy, then you can join the community. It's completely free. It's only for project managers. We're up to about 340 now, which is amazing. Really exciting times, helping each other out on there as well. But that's it. So that's everything. So last few things. Yes, if you don't look after yourself as a project manager, you really got to struggle. Yes, absolutely. Please look after yourselves, everyone. And Jen, thank you. Be wary of those emails coming in. You do not have to reply straight away. Get rid of those notifications, turn it off. Um, oh, just go back to there. There you go. If you want to just scan that QR code. Thank you, Rudy. And yeah, please reach out to me if you've got any other questions coming up. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you all joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Hope you don't have to think about work or do work at all if it is that time of the day for you. And hopefully see you on the next ones in a couple of weeks.